As I explained on Wednesday, so this course stands at the intersection of three large complexes. One complex is the Hebrew Bible. One complex is something we call Judaism. And another complex is something we call Christianity. So here I'm doing, in this intro period of our course, I will be spending one session each on what is the Hebrew Bible today, what is Judaism next Wednesday, and what is Christianity next Friday. Okay, and if you object, surely these topics deserve more than one session each. Yes, I freely agree, but again, if one started, there would be no end to it. So I thought to be equal time for everyone, one session each. So today's topic is, what is the Hebrew Bible? Or, put it differently, what's all the fuss about? Okay, that's what we're doing today, and then Wednesday is Judaism, and Friday is Christianity. Okay, so what is the Hebrew Bible? So I'm going to start right away with a little simple show and tell kind of question. So I recommended that you acquire either physically or virtually this book, the Jewish Study Bible. Another Bible I could have used, and in fact have used in other courses, and still keep next to my desk because it is a very useful reference tool. Here is something called the HarperCollins Study Bible. I also could have brought the Oxford Annotated Bible. I also could have brought the New International Expositor's Bible, etc. Now class, aside from spelling and color and such, and layout, typographical layout, what's the difference between Bible A, Jewish Study Bible, and Bible B, the HarperCollins Study Bible?
The books in it.
The books in it. First suggestion. The books in it are what? The books in it are different or the same?
There's less.
Right. So just to come back to a point I made on Wednesday already. This Bible has fewer books in it. Okay. This Bible has fewer books in it. Right. So this Bible. Well, these two Bibles then differ primarily. Big point is in two different ways. Right. Point one. This Bible is shorter. This Bible has fewer books in it. If you go to the table of contents, that would have been a good idea, Shai, put table of contents on a PDF. Remind me of that for next year. Right. You go to table of contents, and you'll see this Bible doesn't have something called the Old Testament, a word which won't appear anywhere here except occasionally in an essay. This Bible won't have a New Testament. This Bible will simply have Bible. Table of contents. Can you get it up there? Oh, well, yeah, it is up there, in effect. We'll come back to that chart in a second. Right. This Bible simply has Bible. Right? It has 24 books. I guess I'll start with that. 24 books in the leftmost column. See where it says Hebrew Bible. So this listing of the books of the Hebrew Bible, in effect, is the table of contents of that book, leaving aside essays and maps and glossaries and things like that. So here we have 24 books. You see, I've numbered them for you in the traditional Jewish way of counting. And we come to, it ends with number 24. That is the entire Bible. This Bible, however, HarperCollins Study Bible, takes those 24 books, arranges them differently, counts them differently. I'm not too obsessed about that, but you see, you wind up with, this is called, that's a Protestant Bible there. You wind up with 39. So it has the same 24 books, arranges them differently. Come back to that in 1 second. Counts them differently. So in the Protestant Bible you have 39 books. That's not why this Bible has more books though, because those 39 are the same as these 24, just counted differently. What makes these Bibles bigger, more books, is that this Bible also has a New Testament. Because in the eyes of this Bible, those 24, aka 39 books, are the Old Testament. And if there's an Old Testament, you can be sure there's something called a New Testament. So why does this Bible have a New Testament and this Bible doesn't?
That's the Jewish Bible.
That's the Jewish Bible. Exactly. Because the Jewish Bible doesn't have a New Testament. The Jewish Bible doesn't have an Old Testament. The Jewish Bible just is a Jewish Bible, period. Right? It is Christianity which has something called an Old Testament and then something called a New Testament. So, which the books of the Hebrew Bible are now understood to be the first part of the Bible, because for Christians there is a second part, and to be very honest, for Christians the more important part is the second part, the New Testament, the New Bible. 27 books in the Christian New Testament. So, those of course will have a place in this Bible, because this Bible is fundamentally a Christian Bible, even though it says somewhere in the title page it's an ecumenical study Bible or something like that. But it's fundamentally a Christian Bible. And this Bible does not. So that's already a giant difference. Okay? So if you're looking for the Gospel of Matthew, for example, will you find it in this Bible class? No. Will you find it in here? Of course. Very useful notes, annotations, introduction, and so on. Okay. Is this point clear? Yes. Okay. Small footnote, 27 books in the New Testament. How do you remember the number 27? I'll give you an easier way to remember. The same number of operas by Giuseppe Verdi. Okay? 27 operas by Verdi. Okay. So that's point one major difference then between the two. Then this is bigger. Or from the Christian perspective, this is only half the Bible. And we will discuss in the course of our term, right, the emergence of this idea that there is an Old Testament, an Old Covenant, a covenant between God and His chosen people, between an Old Bible, and the Christian idea that there is a New Testament, a New Covenant, a New Bible that surpasses, supplants, and to some extent replaces the Old Covenant and the Old Bible. Right? That is a fundamental tenet of Christian theology of a pre-ecumenical kind. And that's what we will see. We will see that in a few weeks down the road. Okay? So one difference then is this Bible has more books than this one. Okay? The other major point, as you already see from this chart, is that the self-same books which they both have, 24 here, 39 over there, are arranged differently. Okay, this was the point of the reading, that you have a canon, namely the list of chosen books that are chosen to be in the Bible. On the one hand, are 24 versus 39, that's just a matter of way of counting. The real difference is they are arranged differently. You can have a tripartite canon, or you can have a quadripartite, there is such an ugly word, a four-part canon. This is discussed in your reading. Let's make sure we understand this. So here's the Hebrew Bible as arranged in the Jewish Study Bible. So it's tripartite, meaning what? I'm tempted to say it means it has three parts, because that's sort of tautologist. Yeah, so it has three parts. Anything tripartite has three parts. So, first part, the Torah. Okay, the Torah is also called the Pentateuch. You seen that word around, Pentateuch? Yes. I don't have a way to scribble things on the board at the same time, do I? Is there a high-tech way to write things on the board at the same time I'm doing this? There's a low-tech. Thank you. High-tech piece of chalk. Yes, thank you. Okay, there's one word in English, but it has two parts in Greek. Penta, like pentagon, right? 5, and tuch, in Greek meaning rolls or scrolls. So the Torah is also called the 5 scrolls, or the 5 books, the Pentateuch, because it's 5 books, Genesis to Deuteronomy. The Christians have this same part of the Bible in their Bibles. Look across the column on the Protestant Bibles, on the law. So the Torah, the Bible opens the same way, with the same 5 books, on the Christian side as on the Jewish side, except Christians call this the law. Christians call these 5 books the law, which is a translation of the Hebrew word Torah. What does the word Torah literally mean? Anybody?
Instruction.
Instruction. Hey, you must have studied some of this somewhere else.
You said anyway.
Okay, yes. Right. So the word Torah, almost for sure, means instruction, literally. Instruction. What does instruction mean? Well, instruction is a bigger, vaguer term than law. Right? Law, we understand, is much more specific. Instruction might include law, to be sure, but instruction would include much more than just law, would it not? It would include stories, perhaps poetry, preaching, teaching, and law. So the notion on the Jewish side is called the Torah, the Christian side is called the law, but from the point of view of the Bible, they're both in the same spot. Spot number one, up front, the same 5 books in the same order. Okay, questions on these things? Remember, I'm like a speeding freight train. If you don't flag me down, I'll keep going. So you gotta, but I will stop if you flag me. Are we okay? Anybody confused about anything yet? Is this helpful information?
Yes.
Good. Next, so part 1, let's go back to the Jewish side. Part 1 is the Torah, what Christians call the law, consisting of 5 books. Then we have part 2 of our tripartite Bible, something called Nevi'im, which is the Hebrew word for prophets. Navi is a prophet, Nevi'im are many prophets. Right? So the Nevi'im are the prophets. And that's this whole section here, right? Which see goes to number 6 through number 13. Now this section called Nevi'im is actually a little odd. I've never yet been able to quite figure this out. Nevi'im is divided into really 2 parts. Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, right? Books number 6 through 9. Right? These are not really prophets. If you're not sure what a prophet is, I'll come back to that in a second, then we'll come back to that in a couple weeks. Right? Prophets, these are not really prophets, these are narratives. These are stories. And in fact, Genesis through Kings, from book number 1 through book number 9, has what is often called a master narrative, a master storyline. The story begins in the book of Genesis. Open up Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth, in the old translation. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth, chapter 1. Chapter 2, God creates the world a second time. Let's not worry about that right now. Then chapter 3, we start to have action. You know, Adam and Eve, the serpent, Garden of Eden, Cain and Abel. We got sex and murder, right? So we got some action, right? Then we have the flood story coming up. Noah. Right, so we get stories. The book of Genesis is entirely one long narrative, right? From the beginning of the world, creation, the Israelites find their way, are introduced into the text. The Israelites are heroes, introduced into the text. They go down to Egypt. The book of Exodus. They have an exodos. They have a road out. Ex out. Hodos in Greek means road, way, or path. So they have an exodos. They come out of Egypt. Then they go into the wilderness. Then the story kind of bogs down in what Christians call the law. We finally get to some law stuff. We're here the second half of Exodus, the entire book of Leviticus, the entire book of Numbers, just laws, and a couple of occasional episodes of the Israelites in the wilderness. Finally, the book of Deuteronomy, Moses, the chief Israelite, gets up and gives a whole series of deathbed speeches, one after the other. Right? Finally, at the end of Deuteronomy, Moses dies. The Israelites are still in the wilderness. Then the book of Joshua. Go back to your table of contents, book of Joshua. Joshua, Moses' successor, brings the Israelites into the land of Israel, land of Canaan, conquers the land of Canaan, or not exactly, but he does in the book of Joshua anyway. Conquers the land of Canaan, the Israelites are settled in the land of Canaan. Book of Judges, we have a period of interregnum, of chaos. Everybody does whatever they want. No political structure. We need a king, I tell you. That's the book of Samuel. We bring out the book, we now have a new king emerges. First Saul, doesn't work. After Saul, King David, that works. Right, so King David is the new kingly line. David conquers Jerusalem, sets up a state and a capital. Now we're Book of Kings. His son Solomon builds a glorious temple and a glorious palace. Right, and then after Solomon dies, things get a little wobbly. It splits in half. 2 kingdoms, rival kingdoms, political discord, idolatry is afoot all over the land. So God gets angry, wipes out the northern kingdom in 722 BCE, and the southern kingdom gets wiped out in 587 BCE. And that's where the book of Kings stops. The kingdom of Judah is destroyed by the Babylonians. The temple is destroyed. The Judeans are exiled to Babylon. Babylon, modern-day Iraq. And that's where, plus one tiny little paragraph at the very end, that's where the Book of Kings ends. That is the master narrative. For the creation of the world, down to the exile of the Judeans from their land, destruction of the kingdom, the end of the Davidic royal line, House of David comes to an end, all in 587 BCE, stop. That is a grand story, told sequentially in sequential books from Genesis through Kings. And if you ask, Professor, why then is this grand narrative split up between the Torah and the Nevi'im? And why are the narrative books called prophets? Well, there aren't any prophets. Oh yeah, the prophets come into the narrative as figures in the narrative, but these aren't prophetic books, they're just stories. Well, that's what I don't understand. I never quite figured that out. Okay, we're still okay, everybody? Questions? The prophets are Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the 12. Here we finally get to books that I would say legitimately can and should be called prophets. Isaiah is a prophet, Jeremiah is a prophet, Ezekiel is a prophet, and the 12 prophets are 12 prophets. Right, so what are prophets? Spelled with a PH in the middle, not with an F. Right, prophets are human beings who intermediate between the people and God. They bring to the people a message from God. They bring back to God messages on behalf of the people. They are intermediaries. Except that when they open their mouths and speak, out of their mouths comes some of the most glorious poetry written anywhere in the Hebrew Bible. They don't believe in plain speech, they believe in elevated speech. The result is prophetic books are extraordinarily poetic, difficult, sometimes incomprehensible, like reading Shakespeare, right? It sounds beautiful, we have no idea what it means. So, yeah, we have a lot of that in the prophetic books. Those are the prophets. Okay, we will talk about them in due course because both Jews and Christians looked at the prophetic books to find in them messages from God to them. And if you say, but didn't Isaiah live in the 8th century BCE? Didn't Jeremiah live in the 6th century BCE? Didn't Ezekiel live in the 6th century BCE? So how are they talking to Jews and Christians who lived centuries later? Good question. We'll come back to that. Jews and Christians alike thought that the prophetic books gave messages from God not just for their own time, but for all time. Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, those are the prophetic books. Then we got 12 minor prophets, so-called 12, also called 12 minor prophets, not because they're minor, heaven forbid, in any qualitative way, meaning because they're short. You can get 12 of these on one scroll. Isaiah fills up a whole scroll by itself. The 12 minor prophets are small enough you could squish 12 of them onto one scroll. That's why they're called 12 minor prophets. Okay? Then part 3, that's part 1, Torah. Part 2, the prophets, which in turn has prophetic historical books, prophetic books. Then we have part 3, the writings, Tuvim. And if you observe that Tuvim, writing, seems to be a kind of generic catch-all term, rather vague and unspecific, you're right. That's what it is. It's a grab bag. It's a catch-all collection of all kinds of different books. Okay? Big 3 are Psalms, Proverbs, and Job. Then you have a bunch of little ones. Then a collection of 5. 17 is Song of Songs. 18 is Ruth. 19 Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and Esther. These are a liturgical collection. Namely, these are arranged this way because these 5 books are read in synagogue at various points during the liturgical year. That's why these 5 are here. Nothing to do with each other otherwise. And then finally at the end we have an appendix. In appendix we have Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Chronicles. Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Chronicles are again part of our narrative strand, telling the history, the storyline. The key point here is that Ezra and Nehemiah carry the storyline from the exile, 587 BCE, the return of the Judeans from Babylon to Judea, to the Promised Land. They rebuild the temple. They reestablish some kind of corporate existence. And the story, then we have 2 heroic figures who emerge, Ezra and Nehemiah. This is not important for our purposes in this class. They're active in the middle of the 5th century BCE, according to traditional chronology, 450, 440, 430, and then the story stops. So these are kind of appendices to the grand narrative. In the middle of the 5th century BCE, the forward narrative stops. There's no more narrative in the Hebrew Bible after, say, 450, 440, 430 BC. That is a brief survey of the Hebrew Bible. And it's 3 sections: Torah, Nevi'im, and then Ketuvim, or writings, and that gives us Tanakh, which is discussed by Brettler in your reading.
Is that our Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Chronicles?
Yes. They are appendices in the sense that they are expanding upon the grand narrative which had stopped with the destruction of the temple. What happens after the destruction of the temple? Answer: Daniel fills in some stories, Ezra and Nehemiah fill in some stories. Chronicles retells the whole thing from a different perspective, but I don't have time to deal with Chronicles. Okay, so the grand narrative of the Hebrew Bible, the forward motion of the storyteller, stops, say, 430 BCE. Right? There are no more stories in the Hebrew Scriptures which are dated to after 430 BC or so. Okay? And there are the 3 parts of the Bible. What are the 3 parts, class? Torah, Nevi'im, or prophets, and Ketuvim, or writings. Right. That's the Hebrew Bible. And that is how this book is arranged. Leaving aside the introduction in the beginning and the maps and the glossary and the essays in the back, right? But that's how the book is arranged, following this arrangement. Let's look quickly at the Christian Bible. Then we can talk about what the Bible is. So the Christian Bible, as represented by this book, which gives fundamentally a Protestant Bible, because Catholic and Protestant Bibles aren't exactly the same either, but it's just a limit to what I can do in one class. Right? But you do have on your chart in front of you, you can puzzle it out yourself, and Brettler also discusses this briefly. You have on your chart, just so you know where you are, you have a Roman Catholic Bible in this column number 3, and you have a Greek Orthodox Bible in column number 2. I'm going to privilege Protestant Bibles here because, well, we used to live in a waspy country, so we still have a Protestant Bible. Okay, Protestant Bible, column number 4. So what do we see here? Well, it begins with the law. Same 5 books, same order, except it's not called the Torah, it's called the law. But you object. Why is it called the law? It's really narrative. And it's true. From a literary point of view, Genesis to Deuteronomy is narrative, beginning with the creation of the world and ending with the death of Moses. True, but the Christians were hung up on the fact that the large chunk of this book, from the second half of Exodus, all of Leviticus, most of the book of Numbers, and large chunks of Deuteronomy are laws, laws, laws. And as we will see, those Old Testament laws, to use Christian language now, those Old Testament laws will pose a problem to Christians. Because those laws have all those yucky things. Circumcision and not eating all kinds of foods and not doing work every 7th day. Yeesh. We Christians don't have to observe those things, do we? No. But they're in the Bible. Well, all right, that's one of our themes. We'll be coming back to that. So for the Christians, this is the law, these 5 books. Part number 2. Instead of Nevi'im on the Jewish side, here we have something called histories. And here I might say, from the point of view of genre, the Christian Bible is, forgive me to say this, much better. Right? It's much more clearly organized, and one understands how the books cohere. We have the law, the Torah, the cornerstone books, and then we have something called histories. Because these books are, well, histories, narratives, stories. Joshua, Judges take us, we get the story I had before. Ruth is a kind of appendix to the book of Judges. Samuel and Kings. Chronicles is a retelling of the stories in Kings. Ezra and Nehemiah are appendices to the book of Kings, as I already explained. And Esther is a little story attached to the Persian period, or the 5th century BCE, the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. So I would say, as far as genre goes, content goes, this gets an A. Whereas this one, Nevi'im, I don't understand what the connection is between the narratives and the prophetic books. I'm a little confused. So our Christian Bible, as far as genre goes, theme, subject matter goes, works very well. It's very coherent. You have histories, then you have something called wisdom/poetry. These are poetic books. And the last section is something called prophecy. Right, the same prophetic books, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, the big three. Lamentations is an appendix to Jeremiah. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and then the 12. Number 28 through number 39 are the same 12 minor prophets in the same order as the Jewish Bible. Here they are stuck on the end of a section called prophecy. The odd man out here, of course, is Daniel, number 27. Which could have been included in the narrative part, but instead the Christian editors thought Daniel is literally speaking a narrative, but within it are prophecies. So they put the book of Daniel in the prophetic section. So the same 24 books, rearranged differently, renumbered differently, under 4 headings instead of 3, under genre headings, we might say, or content headings. The Jewish headings don't work terribly well. Nevi'im is 2 kinds of books, narratives and prophets, and the grab bag section, Tuvim, writings, doesn't tell you very much of anything. The Christian arrangement of 4 is actually much clearer, makes clearer how these books cohere. Then last of all, Apocrypha. The Protestant Bible has something called the Apocrypha. The Jewish Bible does not have Apocrypha. There are no apocryphal books in the Jewish Study Bible. Either you're in, or as Heidi Klum says, you're out. Right? Either in or you're out. So that's it. There are no apocryphal books. And the Protestant Christian Bible is something called the Apocrypha. We're not going to worry about the Apocrypha in this class, so I'll spend 10 seconds on this, and then we're going to run away from this topic. Okay? So apocryphal books are those books that are Jewish books and that are found in the Greek or sometimes the Latin Bible, but are not found in the Hebrew Bible. So they're found in columns 2 and 3 as part of the Bible, but Martin Luther and the Protestants decided that these books are not really part of the Bible because they are found in the Greek and the Latin, but they're not found in the Hebrew. So they are removed from the body of the Bible and put in the back of the bus. They're put in something called the Apocrypha. All of these books are quote-unquote Jewish books. They're all written in antiquity by ancient Jews. They are not Christian. They are pre-Christian, all of these books. But because they're not in the Hebrew, many of them being written in Greek, for example, therefore they are segregated and put at the back. Okay, that's the end of that. I'm not going to worry about the Apocrypha anymore. It's not our problem. Okay, but it's trying to be helpful. Okay? If you are a Catholic, you don't have Apocrypha in your Bible because you have deuterocanonical books. I can't deal with everything here. It's just too much. Okay? Got it. That's a brief survey of what the Bible is. I want to talk now about where it comes from, why it's important, etc., etc. And that's the lecture notes. But questions on this. Was this a helpful survey of what is inside the Bible? Different Bibles, rival Bibles, etc., etc. So, please ask. And forever hold your peace? No, you can ask me later, but now's a good time to ask. Any questions? Yes, sir?
I'm a Protestant Christian, and I've never seen Apocrypha. What denomination does it do?
What denominations have Apocrypha in their Bibles? I believe it's a generic Protestant description. Maybe you can be helpful, or anyone else can be helpful. There are specific Protestant variations among different Protestant groups.
Just about all of them?
But as far as my experience, as far as I know, all Protestant
Sometimes
groups.
they have a different name, like intertestamental or... So maybe
It's possible there are newer names or different names for these collections. But I believe, no, Calvinists, Lutherans, it's all the same, right? These would be Apocrypha belonging to the Protestant Bible. Is that correct? I believe it is. Yes?
Well, I think at some point in the 19th or 20th century, Protestant Bibles stopped being printed with the Apocrypha in a development of Christian theology that
Oh, the apocryphal books were left out altogether.
So most printed Protestant Bibles today, I believe, other than the academic ones, do not contain the
That's an interesting point. That began in the 19th century, you say? Okay, a little vague on that. Okay. But if you go to the motel and grab a Gideon's Bible, it won't have the Apocrypha in it. No, because they want you to read the Bible, not the Apocrypha. Right, okay. Thank you, that was a helpful point. Okay? Let's now discuss what the Bible is. And for that I need to hit the escape button. Thank you, Yanni.
And then you click on
There we go. Okay. Yeah, I got it. Okay. This is our lecture for today. It's only 10:45. Plenty of time. Right. Okay. So I'll talk a little extra fast. Just a joke. Okay. So what is the Hebrew Bible? We've given a rapid bird's eye survey of the table of contents of the Bible. Right? Just trying to show you that what the Bible is not a stable entity. It depends upon which Bible you pick up, what you're going to see and how it's arranged. So here are the key points about the Bible. First, the Bible is an anthology, right? It is not a single book. It is a collection of books. How many books, class? Review already. How many books? 24, right, exactly. Speaking Jewishly, there are 24. Speaking Protestantly, there are 39, right. So it is a collection of books. Right? It is not a single unitary book. It is a collection of books. Each of these books that it contains, in turn, is a composition with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it is an anthology, first and foremost. It is a collection of books. And as you've already seen, it is a collection of books of different types. Not the same, or perhaps you might want to say genre. We have narratives. We have prophecies. We have wisdom books, language I didn't use yet. And we have hymns. Wisdom books. Well, I wrote down here, advice how to live a good life, or books reflecting on the ways of the world. That's good enough for our purposes here at the moment, right? These are books that, the book of Proverbs, or large chunks of the book of Psalms, or the book of Job, right? These are wisdom books, referring here not to genre, but content. They also can be called poetical books, because they're in poetry. But we have history, prophecy, wisdom, and we have hymns. Right, these are 4 different kinds of books, and as we've already seen, the Protestant Bibles actually arrange the biblical books more or less under these headings: law, history, poetry, hymns, prophecy. Okay? So we have different books of different genres, different types. A. B. These books also come from different social groups. They have different social origins. This is probably not directly relevant for our course, but hey, I have you captive, I'll teach you something extra. Right. First, priests. Priests were a major social force in ancient Israel. Israel, the society and culture that produced the Bible, produced the Hebrew Bible. Priests are not, you don't go to seminary to become a priest. You are a priest because your papa was a priest. Your papa was a priest because his papa was a priest. So if your last name is Cohen, then that means, of course, that you claim priestly status. Peasants. Moi, I'm a priest. Or at least that's what my name Cohen says about myself. Whether I really am a priestly line, of course, I don't know. And it doesn't really matter anymore. But that's a different discussion. Anyway, so priests in ancient Israel were the group in charge of the temple in Jerusalem. The priests in ancient Israel were the chosen hieratic class. Nice fancy word. Hieratic class. Which is a fancy word for priestly. Right? Hierus in Greek means priest. Like hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics. Right, sacred writing, priestly writing. So, we have priests. Anyway, priests, when a priest opens his mouth and speaks, what comes out of a priest's mouth? The Bible has a word for it. The word is Torah. Torah means not just instruction. The word Torah actually means priestly instruction. When the priest is telling you how to do things, when the priest is telling you, God asked you to do this, God demands that you do that. When the priest is speaking priestly, in a priestly manner, that which comes out of his mouth is Torah. And indeed, in those 5 books that we call the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, which we call the Pentateuch, large chunks of those 5 books come from priestly sources and reflect priestly view of the world and priestly concerns. If you're intrigued by what I'm talking about, you should take my other class on Introduction to the Hebrew Bible, where we talk about this at great length. Probably too great length, but we talk about it at great length. So one social group behind the Hebrew Bible are priests of the temple, who claim descent from a common ancestor through the paternal line. We also have prophets, I've already spoken of. Prophets. Prophets are human beings, usually men, but there are a few women prophets too, who speak the word of the Lord. The priests are located in the institution of the temple. The prophets are non-institutional figures, free-floating radicals on the deck of ancient Israel, right? Free-floating cannons, shooting cannonballs off in all directions, not caring about kings, not caring about priests, not caring about the army, not caring about the state, caring only for the word of the Lord. And I will speak the word of the Lord, and I don't care what you think. So they're very unpleasant people. Completely obnoxious and completely uncontrollable. But these are prophets. So priests have an institution and the state behind them. The temple, and behind the temple is the monarchy, the state. Prophets are anti-institutional figures who come and give you the message of the Lord in a direct, unintermediated fashion. The only intermediary is the prophet himself. Those are the prophets. I mentioned them before, who give their articles in particularly poetic and elevated language. So those are prophets. Third group, we have our scribes, or sages. These are the ones who write wisdom books, give you a benefit of their advice about how to lead your life, how to live. These are 3 different social groups. The scribes of the Hebrew Bible are probably ancestors of the scribes whom you meet in the New Testament. They probably are the ancestors of the Pharisees, who will turn out to be the rabbis. But that's a long trajectory, and I don't have time to deal with that here. But if you're interested, then this is where we're going with these things. So, priests, prophets, scribes. 3 different social groups behind the books of the Hebrew Bible, and lurking behind that division is the tripartite arrangement of the Hebrew Bible. Torah, priests, Nevi'im, prophets, and Tuvim, writings, many of them going back to the sages. Okay, so here we are. The Bible then is an anthology. It has books of different genres, of different types, coming from different social groups. The books also vary in date. They're not written all at the same time. They're written early and they're written late. What does early and late mean? Well, here we have the great conflict between traditional views, traditional Jewish and Christian views of these books, and modern Bible scholarship, or academic Bible scholarship. So if you are a traditionalist, Jew or a Christian, then you believe, or at least you've been taught, that the Bible begins with the 5 books of Moses, because Moses is the first and greatest of the prophets. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt into the wilderness at Mount Sinai. Moses, a.k.a. Charlton Heston, received the 10 Commandments, right, from the Lord, and then wrote up not just the 10 Commandments, but wrote the 5 books of Moses, as they're called, another name for the Pentateuch. And therefore, by the chronology of our sense of chronology, this would have been around the year 1200 BCE, give or take. So that would be the earliest of the biblical books, if you are a traditionalist. It would be the 5 books of Moses. And then you would look down, and then the traditionalists will vary and debate. And the traditionalists would say, well, the last books of the Hebrew Bible were written precisely around the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, 450, 440, 430 BCE, when the grand narrative comes to a close. And indeed, there are no biblical books after 450, 440, 430, the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, because those are the last of the biblical books, period. That's if you are a traditionalist. 1200 at the up end, 5 books of Moses, down to the 5th century BCE, the period of Ezra and Nehemiah, the so-called period of the Persian Empire. If you, however, are not a traditionalist, if you are an advocate of modern academic Bible scholarship, here's a representative right here, a PhD student getting a PhD at Harvard University in the Bible. Is that right? Right. If you are an advocate of modern Bible scholarship, then you will say, well, it's a very nice belief that you traditionalists have, but unfortunately it cannot be documented, it cannot be shown. It is inherently implausible, and I'll tell you what the real story is. The earliest biblical books that take shape are probably the prophetic books. The prophetic books begin in the 8th century BCE. Before the 8th century BCE, you probably have traditions, you probably have stories, maybe oral collections of material, but you don't have any books. Something approximating a biblical book, you have to wait to the 8th century BCE, when we see there is both of the prophets on the one side, and the court of Hezekiah the king, end of 8th century BCE, is busy collecting traditions, collecting books. That's when the biblical books begin. No one's saying they're all invented then, but that's when we seem to have the beginning of creativity of creating something we might call books, the 8th century BCE. And as far as the 5 books of Moses in particular, Moses didn't write it. I'm not even sure Moses existed. And if he did exist, I'm sure he didn't write the 5 books of Moses. Moses being something like King Arthur, semi-legendary, semi-historical figure lost in the mists. So who wrote the 5 books of Moses? Modern Bible scholarship will tell you. Well, they're written and compiled out of multiple sources at a much later time, and probably did not achieve the form which they now have until the 6th or 5th century BCE. Well after the time of Moses. Not only that, but whereas a traditional belief, traditional Jews and Christians will look upon the biblical books as unitary compositions. The book of Isaiah, written by Isaiah. The book of Jeremiah, written by Jeremiah. 5 books of Moses, written by Moses. But traditional view will see them as unitary compositions. Modern Bible scholarship will say they're not unitary at all. These are composite. These are works written by large numbers of authors over a large period of time. And in fact, according to modern Bible scholarship, there's not a single biblical book which in its current form is written by a single author at a single moment. Well, maybe the book of Obadiah, because it's only 1 chapter long. How many interpolations can you have in a book of composition of only 1 chapter? All right, maybe Obadiah, one of the 12 minor prophets. That's at the one end. At the other end, traditionalists say all the biblical books are finished and done by the middle of the 5th century BCE. Modern Bible scholarship will say that's not true. Biblical books are written much after that point. They're still being written. They don't admit that they're written after the grand narrative has stopped, but they are written much later. Primary poster child example, the book of Daniel. You traditionalists think the book of Daniel was written in the 6th century BCE, talking about the period after the destruction of the temple in the 6th century BCE. Modern Bible scholarship will tell you, yes, that's a fictive date. That's a literary date. That's what the author wants you to believe. But we know it's not true. Because we know the book of Daniel, especially chapters 12, 13, and 14, cannot have achieved their current form until sometime in the 2nd century BCE. Okay, this question does not directly concern us in this course. I will simply observe that the Jews and Christians we'll be talking about are not modern Bible scholars. I got 3 minutes, just relax. Are not modern Bible scholars. They, of course, thought that Moses wrote the books of Moses. They, of course, thought Isaiah wrote the prophecies of Isaiah. And don't tell them about 1st Isaiah and 2nd Isaiah and 3rd Isaiah and 4th Isaiah and later interpolations of the book of Isaiah. They don't know about any of that. Isaiah, damn it, is the book of Isaiah. Right. So the Jews and Christians we'll be talking about are people who read the Bible and read it very seriously, to be sure, and read it very carefully, to be sure. But on this fundamental conceptual point, they regarded the Bible as indeed a collection of unitary compositions written by unitary authors at a specific moment. But for us, so even for them there is chronological diversity and authorial diversity, and for us who are modern Bible scholars, that diversity is even greater. Okay, now comes my last big point, which I have 2.5 minutes. Despite the fact that the Bible is diverse in date, in genre, in origin, in chronology, despite that diversity, I would say at the end of the day, the Hebrew Bible is remarkably uniform in the sense that there is indeed a grand theme or set of themes that virtually unite the entire book from Genesis through Chronicles. These are the big themes. These are the themes that Jews and Christians both accept. These are the themes that Jews and Christians will argue about in detail. God is the universal God who created the whole world and established universal moral order. This is the God of both nature and history, the God who created the world, nature, and history, God who controls human events, history. God stands in special relationship with his people, we call people of Israel, whom both Jews and Christians alike will regard as their ancestors. We'll discuss that. Last but not least, God rewards the righteous, punishes the wicked, individually and collectively. These are the themes, the subject matter of all the 24 books. One or two of these books question some or all of those that receive truths, most famously the book of Job and the book of Ecclesiastes. But at the end of the day, as the end of Ecclesiastes says, what is there to do except fear the Lord and do his will? These are the themes of the Hebrew Bible. These are the themes that both Jews and Christians will accept, and then we'll discuss in detail how exactly to understand these truths. Okay, everybody, 10:59. Have a wonderful long weekend. I hope to see you next Wednesday.